Hey guys, welcome to episode 10 of the weekly update, the series where I talk about my experiences with pickleball paddles that I've hit throughout the week. Now, this week was focused more on hitting existing paddles rather than doing first impressions of new ones because I wanted to do more durability testing on some of these recent power paddle releases and to see if my opinions have changed at all on their overall firepower. Anyways, let's get into it. All right, now going into our power paddle rankings, we're going to go in order of what I perceive as their overall firepower. So this week, the paddle that I thought hit the hardest is going to be the Planker from Paddlesshop. Now, I have covered this paddle briefly in the past, but for those of you unfamiliar with it, this is a Gen 3 paddle, and it's basically a Joola mod clone in the Hyperion shape. In terms of overall firepower, it hits just as hard. Now, the feel of the face is a bit different because the surface material isn't quite the same, and also the build quality is slightly cheaper. But if we're talking strictly the overall firepower, this is probably the same thing as a Joola mod. And in fact, the more I hit with it, the more it's starting to open up more, and it's actually starting to get hotter. Now, this paddle also isn't USAP or UPA approved, but at the same time, it does go for around 60 bucks after a discount code. So if you're looking to just mess around or just do rec play with a really powerful paddle that's pretty affordable, this is a fun one to consider. Next up on our list for overall firepower is going to be the Pro 4 series from Joola, specifically the Percy 16mm and the Graph 16mm, as those are the two models that I do have. Now, between the two, there's no noticeable difference in their power levels, so I'm going to lump them in the same category. So for power, I'm going to put this at the number 2 spot underneath the Planker, and for pop, I'm going to put this in the number 3 spots. I've been hitting these on and off for the past few weeks, and so far there's been no issues in durability, but I'll continue to monitor that. But my overall opinions are still the same. I'd say that they're a slightly more plush feeling than the Gen 3S, and overall firepower is really similar to them. I think it's just a tad bit underneath, but it's not a huge difference. But what's more interesting is just how plush they feel. I would say out of all the paddles on this list that we're covering today, they're actually one of the most plushest feeling. But they will be coming out with more shapes, so hopefully I'll get a chance to hit these more, and stay tuned for more as I continue to do durability testing on them. All right, next on the list is going to be a paddle that a lot of you have been asking me about, and that's going to be the Paddletek Bantam series, specifically the Paddletek Bantam TKO 12.7mm with the shorter handle. I was able to borrow my friends for a bit, so that's how I was able to get it onto the list for the week. Now, for overall pop, I would actually place this in the number 2 spot. I think it was a really close call between this and the Planker at number 1, but because the Planker I have has opened up a bit more and is starting to get a bit hotter, that's why that's at number 1, and the Paddletek is at number 2. But the TKOs feel really nice. I think they have a really nice crisp feel off the face, and especially if you can hit the sweet spot dead center on, the paddle feels really nice hitting the ball, and the ball really flies off. But in terms of the power, I would actually place this in the number 4 spot. Now, there are some things to consider since this is the shorter handle version, so it is going to have a little less power, and also because I didn't add any perimeter weighting to it, so I hit this paddle stock form, and I think that's a big reason the power wasn't as high as I was expecting, but I think with weight, this probably could have been in the number 3 spot. Anyways, it was really fun to hit that paddle, and hopefully in the future I can get my own and not have to rely on other people to demo theirs. All right, so the next paddle on this list is going to be an interesting one because I don't think everyone is going to have the same experience as me, and that's going to be the Thrive Smoke. So for power, I'm actually going to put this in the number 3 spot, so below the Joola Pro 4s, but above the Paddletek 12.7. And for pop, it's going to be the lowest one on the list so far at the number 5 spot. Now, the reason I don't think people are going to have the same experience as me is because I myself have had varying experiences as well. So when I initially got this paddle, I thought it wasn't anything special. I thought it was a stiff feeling Gen 2. But it was after a few days in, after a few more play sessions, when I felt that the paddle face started to open up a bit more and it started to have a more crisp feel of the face. I started to see where the Paddletech-esque comparisons came from because it did have a very similar sensation. It isn't quite as poppy, but I can see where the comparisons come from, and I would say out of all the paddles on the market, this is the closest in feel to a Paddletech. And the overall power shot up a lot as well. I wouldn't say that this paddle's core crusher are broken because when I do press my fingers in, not my face, but my fingers into the paddle face. There's no crunching and there's no give into the face, but yeah, I'm just curious to see what other people's opinions are as well. Because I do have a friend that did buy one off pre-order, and his impression so far is the same as my initial impressions. He's been hitting it and he has been impressed with it, but he does like the current one I have right now. But yeah, like this one, it hits harder than a Paddletech 12.7 if we're comparing them both in stock form, but the pop just quite isn't there. It's still really poppy compared to like a Gen 2, and it has a lot of pop in general, but just not as much compared to the other paddles on this list. All right, moving on, next paddle is going to be the Franklin C45, but this time with a weighted tape setup and with the paddle having now been broken in. First, let's talk about the weighted tape setup, as some of you have been asking me about this, but basically all it did was add tungsten tape all over the edges of the paddle, and this brought the swing weight up to 118 and the twist weight up to 6.80. As for the break-in, it's gotten a lot louder and it has a more hollow sensation, so the feel is more similar to a Joola Gen 3S now. But in terms of the firepower, I don't think it really shot it up drastically. I think it shot it up just slightly. And for power, I would place this in the number 5 spot, right below the Paddletech 12.7. And for pop, I would place this in the number 4 spot, so above the Thrive Smoke, but below the Joola Pro 4. Like I said, the break-in didn't really shoot this paddle's power up drastically, and even with that lead tape setup, I think what's really holding it back is the paddle's shape as well. So that's why the firepower isn't as high as you would expect compared to the other paddles on this list. But overall, because it is really customizable and it's one of the few hybrid power paddles out there, well, I would still say power paddle in quotation marks because it does need to break it in a bit in my opinion, and you still need to add a lot of perimeter weighting. But if that's something you like to do, this is a really nice paddle to consider. All right, moving on, we have the 11624 Hurache X Power. So this is going to be at the bottom of the list for power at number 7, and for pop, this is going to be at number 6, so just underneath the Thrive Smoke. Now, my opinions on this paddle haven't changed at all, so I still think this is a really good entry-level power paddle just because compared to the other paddles on this list, it's more controllable and easier to use. It is a bit on the stiffer end, so compared to something like the Joola Pro 4, it does have good dwell time, but it's a stiffer feel compared to that. It's not as plush feeling. But overall, I still think this is a really good option. It's affordable and just a good option for people to look into if they want to get into the power paddle game. All right, now the last paddle we're going to talk about is going to be the Gearbox Pro Ultimate Power 14mm elongated option. Now for power, this is going to be in the number 6 spot, above the 11624 Hurache X Power, but below the Franklin C45. And for pop, surprisingly, this is going to be at the bottom at the number 7 spot. Now you would expect that this edgeless 14mm paddle would have a lot of pop to it, but it's actually got more of a solid and dense feel to it. It's more plush feeling than some of the other paddles on this list, which is kind of surprising considering how the PPEs felt. But anyways, you also have to remember that this paddle still hasn't broken in. It's still relatively new to me, and while I have hit it for on and off for a few weeks, I don't consider this paddle to be broken in, but I will continue to hit it, and if it does break in, I will provide an update on where its new ranking will be. Anyways, that's it for this week's episode of the Weekly Update. Now, I am releasing this a bit later than normal, mainly because allergy season is here and I was pretty congested over the weekend, so had to record this later. But anyways, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below.
Some even do it like this.